Welcome to the Tower Coffee Hour. This is Preston, or Ty Tyree, and I was able to sit down with John Mills and his son Quinten in their garage here in Miller this week. John has a coffee roaster in his garage and provides many different coffee options to friends and neighbors. We talked about John's early life. He's a Texas native, having been born in Midland, but has lived outside of Detroit, Michigan, in London, England, and in Cape Town, South Africa. And his family is from Australia, so it's interesting talking with him. John's move to Austin and finally to Miller gave him a chance to get a small commercial coffee roaster. John has created a coffee roastery in his garage and supplies many different varieties of beans roasted to order. I took advantage of his subscription plan to get one order of coffee each month for $15. I am looking forward to taste testing some of his specialty roasts. So please join John, Quinten, and me in John's garage to talk about coffee. John, it's awfully nice to meet you, and Quinten. Yeah.
Really nice to meet you as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Quinten. Tell me more about you. Where were you born?
All right. So
When were you born?
When was I born? Where was I born? I was born in Texas. I was born out in West Texas in a little town called Midland. That alone is kind of an interesting story because, typically people from Midland are very involved in sort of oil and petroleum.
Sort of, yes.
Not everybody, but some of them. And my family wasn't. In fact, my dad, he's Australian. My mom, she's from New York, but she had been living in Australia with him for a number of years. And my two older siblings were actually born in Adelaide, in Australia. And my dad, he would build. He was working for a race team where he would build performance race engines, different cars. I forget the name of the league itself, but this was sort of back in the 60s and the 70s, and they had sort of an abrupt change in that team, and they moved to this little town in West Texas. And my dad, I don't think had ever been to West Texas before. Neither my mom, I suppose. None of us had actually been to Texas before. And this is sort of funny because there's this sort of this racing culture, a small pocket of racing out there. And so there's this team that was ended up building not Formula One, but IndyCar engines.
Indy cars in Texas.
Yeah, in Texas.
Okay.
And in Midland of Texas, of all places. And anyway, so a few years after they moved to Texas, I was born, and I lived there for 13 years or so.
Okay.
So moved. I think it was like 6th or 7th grade, and we moved to Michigan, which is
what year was that you were born?
I was born in 1985. So I was born in 1985. So I moved when I was 13. So it was right around millennium. So I think it was 1999. So we moved to Michigan, and so there was like a bit more of a natural fit for racing. It was for my dad's company, and so that's sort of when I think about like childhood or home, I think about probably not so much Midland, Texas, in spite of I lived there for a good 13 years. I think of more of Michigan. I think of just.
So you were in Midland when you were Quinten's age.
Correct. Yeah.
Quinten is 9. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
We're here today with John and Quinten Mills. John is the older one sitting here in the chair. Quinten is our friend standing with us. And we're going to talk about their lives and coffee. You're in Michigan. You go through school, you get out, you start working, I assume, doing something. What?
Yeah. So this is another, actually, as I sort of moved into Michigan, I got really interested in computers.
Okay.
So particularly like programming, just getting like really curious about like how computers work. This was also the time that the web was becoming really alive. Like the internet was becoming very popular, and I was really fascinated with particularly the internet. Not as much as like writing code for like building a video game, but really like how services and products are connected. That was really fascinating to me, and so through from a very early age, I learned really how to write code and program computers. And in fact, I think that's probably an interesting segue into coffee, but I'll hold back on that story for a minute. So learned how to code, that was sort of my hobby. I even in high school, I went to one of the high schools where they had a computer science class. Okay. And it was one of the sort of like early computer science classes, and just a fantastic teacher who really taught me more than just writing code, but just like how to work with it, how to understand it.
Good.
he was my first period teacher, and I was always late. And then after high school, I had an opportunity to work professionally as like a software engineer. It was just a very small company. It was a startup with these two brothers, and we had they sort of invited me in, and they sort of like showed me the ropes, and this was great. And I knew at the time, like I knew I wanted to go to college. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in college though, because I had enough of a foundation of computer science and sort of the fundamentals there that I wasn't it didn't really spark my joy or spark my curiosity of I want to go learn something. And so I delayed going to college for a few years, and I ended up working for this company. This company ended up being fairly successful.
Quinten, have you heard this story before?
No.
No. Good.
I'm going to quiz you on it later.
This is good.
Thanks, yeah. You're going to come into the story very soon, actually.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The company that I was working for, we ended up getting acquired as good companies can. And then after that, we actually acquired a company in London, in the UK. So at the time I was maybe 20, I forget exactly how old I was, maybe say 23, 24, 25. I remember very vividly, I had this, I went into work sort of an average day, and I remember my boss, he comes to me and he says, hey, I know, like, you don't have a house, you don't have a dog, and would you be interested in moving to London, because you sort of working on this project, we want to move this project out to the UK where this company is. This would be a good opportunity to just like handle like an acquisition, like a good from a business side really well, but also like to build a culture, like an engineering, like a software engineering culture. Was basically jumped at the chance. So they were gonna fly me out there, put me up, and I was coming from a little town outside of Detroit to moving into London.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did anyone go on the plane with you? Like anyone like?
Nobody I knew.
Okay.
I went all on my own.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I got there, and the company was great. And London is such a fun city.
Oh yeah.
Really fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in London, and I'm assuming that's where you met your South African wife.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's where you're going to come to the story in a minute. So that's where I met Faye. She's South African. She'd been living in London at the time for I think about 16 years. I should know that, but I think about 16 years. She had actually done a similar move. So when I moved from Texas to Michigan around 13, she had moved from Cape Town to London at a similar age.
Okay.
As much as I love London, I still do.
It sometimes can be confusing.
I think for a big city, it's one of the least confusing cities.
Really?
What really drove me away from London is the weather, and I
It's like this.
It's a lot like this.
Like every day.
Every day, it's just too cold. It is too wet. And
It feels like you're walking to Alaska every day without like the actual factor of snow.
No snow well, some snow in London.
Yeah, but
not
then
much. Yeah.
Not like snowing every
But that's
day.
why they talk about a foggy day in London.
foggy day in London.
Yeah.
Like that's their equivalent of snow and ice.
Exactly. Yeah. I think maybe a small part of my story, of my childhood story, is when we had moved from Texas to Michigan, we had actually left one of my siblings behind, because she is about 7 years older than I am, and so she was just going to college at the time.
Okay.
So she went to St. Edward's University back in, I don't know exactly, 1998 or something, I don't know. So we left her here, and so she had actually she's a longtime Austinite, and she's still here. Although recently had moved to Bastrop, and so I had this connection back here in Austin. And so when Faye and I got together, and I said, hey, not really enjoying this London thing, would you be interested in coming back to Austin with me? And so one thing led to another, so she got here.
Yeah.
And we moved into a little bungalow in Cherrywood.
Oh, sure.
And we had lived in Cherrywood for about 10 years. During that time, Quinten, you emerged.
That was 9 years ago?
About 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And when Mueller was coming,
Well, you saw the beginning.
yeah, we did, because we were so close, and we knew a lot of friends here, and we would just constantly be on the website saying, "Oh, this house is really cool." You know, it took me a long time to come around to the idea. But realistically, it was over the course of years that we would look. In fact, like where we are now, it didn't even exist
No.
when we started looking.
It did not, yeah.
One time I was using my metal detector in our backyard, and I pulled out a small shard of an airplane.
Wow.
It's really cool.
Hope it's not one that crashed, huh?
Anyway, so that was
Okay,
a
so
bit of a fun tidbit.
We're going to get back into a discussion of
Sure.
Miller at the end.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
we need to talk
I
more
think
about
we need to talk
coffee.
about coffee.
All right,
Yes.
let's go for it.
I
Because I
think
feel like we've been talking about his life more than coffee.
we've been talking about your dad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then the next question is, how did you go from being a software engineer? Are you still a software
I am,
engineer?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you make that step into coffee?
So,
know,
yeah.
And, what was that first? I might want to roast this stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
That's not normal
It's
conversation.
not your first.
Yeah, it's like not your first idea.
So it's a really good story. I think it's a really good story. And so coffee for me has always been a delight, for lack of a better word, a real delight for me. And so when I was sort of learning how to code, I was the sort of typical person where I would love to stay up extra late, working on a project, getting something done, and I would just drink coffee nonstop. It wasn't fancy coffee. It was probably Folgers in your cup coffee. In fact, I don't even know the name of the coffee that my parents had when I was growing up. I do remember the Folgers tin, of course, but it was typical sort of just drip coffee, and I would drink it black, and I loved it. I never really enjoyed milk, a little bit maybe, but mostly it was just black coffee. And from an early age, like probably that sort of 13, 14 age, coffee is just what you like. You don't have to follow the trends. You just drink what you like. And so my background.
That's a really good lesson for most of life. Okay? You do what you like. Make sure it's reasonable, but yeah, you don't have to follow the pack.
I've always liked coffee, but there was never this sort of like particular moment. But I would always sort of identify as like a coffee person. Like every time I would travel, I'd go somewhere, going into
Great, thank
great
you.
idea. Whenever I would travel, I'd grab a coffee. In college, though, there was this one particular coffee shop that I would frequent, and my favorite drink would always be an iced Americano. I put a little bit of milk in there, and I'd sort of I'd always grab that right before class. And I don't know if I actually finished that story. I did end up getting a degree. I actually have a degree in economics, of all things. That's all. Again, to your point, a whole other story. But yes, I did get a degree, and so I'd always go to this coffee shop. It wasn't really until after Quinten was born that we actually had moved temporarily to Cape Town, just after he was born.
Wow.
So this is in South Africa. So basically, the quick story is, after he was born, we wanted to be a little bit closer to family, so we moved out there, and we stayed there for maybe a little under 2 years, but about 2 years.
Okay.
This was if I'm honest, this was probably the first time that I really understood what it meant to have a coffee culture. Cape Town is not a typical coffee place, or it doesn't usually come up as a coffee place.
Didn't come to mind immediately.
No, it's more of a wine place, but their coffee culture is really strong, and so everywhere you go, really, like whether it's every restaurant, like farm stall, on different farms on the road, on traveling, they would always have a barista and a really nice espresso machine. So their typical drinks are espresso drinks, so like a cappuccino, flat white, lattes. We went over there, got really into the coffee culture there. So the company I was working for, it was a tech startup, but it was a really cool office, sort of in the central business district of Cape Town, and you could see Table Mountain in the background. And everything was very nice. It was probably arguably one of the nicest offices I've ever worked in. And they had a barista, an on-staff barista.
Okay.
And he was fantastic. And every morning you'd go in, you'd wait in this very long line, and you would chat. And it became like a company culture almost of, people talking about sort of what they're going to work on their day, but also meeting different people. It wasn't a big company, but it was probably like 300 or 400 people.
Ah, yeah.
And that's when I started to really just sort of get really curious, really interested in, like, okay, well, what am I actually drinking? So yeah, that was sort of my first big participation in like what it meant to be like a part of a coffee culture. There's so many fantastic coffee shops around Cape Town, so um, we'd always go for little like offsites or like meetings offsite, walking distance from the office, grab coffee, and it was just this really enjoyable experience. And what's interesting now is it was around 2017, I believe. And I don't know, I never really know like how much this information got shared around the world news networks, but Cape Town as a city almost ran out of water, like drinking water. And basically what it was is a result of cyclical dry seasons. And all of the dams where we collected water were dry. And this wasn't just sort of like a fear-mongering point. This was a very literal.
This was real.
You could go down to the dam and see that there's no water. And so we went through this really interesting period where every day you kind of think, okay, it's going to rain, it's going to change, and nothing really changed. And so we would progressively get closer and closer to this point of like real catastrophe. And the company I was working for, we went through a couple of exercises. We went through these contingency planning sort of, I don't know if you call them workshops or not, where how do we as a company continue operating if we run out of water? Now, in retrospect, maybe that sounds a little bit like the last thing you're worried about if your country runs out of water, but there's some continuity question there. And so one of the continuity questions was, we are going to, or they sent, this was before COVID, so nobody really had like a working from home culture. So we went through an experience where we sent everybody home and we said, you guys all need to go home, figure out how to work remotely if it hits the fan and we run out of water. One of the first things I did, and I remember very vividly, it was a Friday, and I'm pretty sure it was right after like we had just gotten a bonus. And so I took my bonus and I went down to the store that was selling espresso machines. And I said, well, I'm so accustomed to drinking my daily espresso now that if I have to work at home where you run out of water, I need to have the most important thing for me right now is is to buy an espresso machine during this time of crisis.
Yeah, of course.
And so I went down there, I grabbed this espresso machine. It was like this little Breville. It's a very common espresso machine nowadays. It was the Breville, had a grinder built into it. Brought it home. And it was the most fun, enjoyable experience because now I could finally get curious and tinker with this. So I had all the beans, I had all the water, I had all the, the learning material, YouTube's books, etc. And I spent so much time just learning about how to brew and extract coffee using an espresso machine. So that for me was probably the moment at which it sort of like solidified, like, okay, I'm more than an average coffee person. I'm like, this is more than just a hobby. This is actually like a thing that I really am passionate about. And so since then, obviously we're back here in Austin, and I've gone through a number of different espresso machines. I unfortunately don't still have that one. I do have a part of it. It's up there actually. It's one of the boilers that I've kept. So that was that. And so now I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So it wasn't until about a year ago. I forget exactly if I was on email or Instagram or something like this, but there was an ad that showed up about taking learning how to roast coffee course, like a roasting 101. And I was like, this sounds really interesting. And like this theme of me, I think, is, I get curious about things and I just want to learn more. And so I reached out to through this ad, and what I actually learned is this company, I think at the time was maybe a relatively new company. I'm not sure exactly the timeline, but relatively new. The company is called Rising Tide Roastery, actually Rising Tide Collab, I think. And what it is, it's like this fascinating company. I never even thought about this idea before. But what it is, they have a big warehouse down in South Austin, and they have these quite fancy coffee roasting machines. And for people who don't know, coffee roasting machines are big, fairly hard to run, and expensive.
So this is not one of what you were describing.
This is definitely not. This is the smallest one. And I'm going to explain to here in a minute about my coffee roaster. At Rising Tide, they actually have this exact same coffee roaster.
Okay.
And the pitch on it, the reason they have this roaster and the reason you train on this roaster is that this is considered like a very manual roaster.
Okay.
Meaning you have to control the gas, the heat, the airflow, the timing, and all you really get is temperature sensors, and that's it. Everything else is very manual. A lot of the newer machines can be more automatic. So you plug in a roast profile and you say, okay, roast for this amount at this degree, and you, etc. And so anyway, so I went down there and I was like, wow. And I knew nothing about coffee roasting. I mean, I think I had a really good sensory development of like what good coffee tasted like different local companies. But I would also get beans from all across the U.S., across the world. Like I loved experimenting with different beans. So we learned on this machine. It's called an ARC 800. It's a machine that's built out in Taiwan. Probably one of the simplest but most like interesting things is that I had no idea how long it takes to roast coffee. And in fact, it's kind of a fun like trivia question for people because it takes anywhere from maybe 8 minutes to 10 minutes to like 12 minutes. It's a very fast process. And then I can get into some of the specifics there. And then but for me it was I as much as I like getting into hobbies, there was something very special about roasting coffee. And I think the particular thing that stood out to me was roasting coffee is a little bit of a scientific endeavor. So you do have it's a very scientific approach. Like you want to like isolate variables like the temperature that you drop the beans in from the hopper, the amount of time, the amount of temperature rise. So in that part can be very scientific, but the flip side of it is that it's also a very artistic and craftsman sort of endeavor, because at the end of the day you get these green beans. The green beans are the beans that have been picked off of the coffee tree. They're actually cherries. The processing of coffee is really cool because you have a coffee tree, and it sort of looks like it's a pretty like, if I'm honest, a pretty uninteresting tree. The leaves are sort of oval, like they're sort of long, but they produce cherries. And they call them coffee cherries, and they look a lot like cherries.
Well, when they get ripe, they turn red.
They turn bright red.
Okay.
Exactly. And so that's when you pick them. And in fact, some of the farmers, they actually have like these color gratings they wear on their wrist. And so they say, okay, this is red, just pick this, because I think over time you start to, start to be complicated. So then you pick this coffee cherry and you let it ferment. And almost all coffee, basically all coffee is fermented. What happens though from that point is very different.
When I think of ferment, it's in a liquid. But are we doing this in a liquid, or are we just letting it age?
It's both. And so it gets very complex. So
let's get up and go to your equipment.
Okay. So this is the coffee roaster. Like I said earlier, this is called an ARC 800, but the 800 comes from the amount or the volume of coffee that you can roast at any time, so 800 grams of coffee. And so coffee roasters effectively have two main things that you can control. The first thing is airflow. That's one of the variables that you can control. The other is gas. Okay. This is a propane-powered coffee roaster. They do come in natural gas. Nowadays, more and more becoming electric, but it's overall a fairly efficient machine. So inside of here is basically a gas, a flame that's powered by the gas. And if you want to have more heat, you increase this. Those are the only two variables that you actually have, things you can control.
Air and heat.
Air and heat.
Okay.
What makes a coffee roaster unique is the temperature sensors, the probes. So another name for them are called RTDs, I believe, or thermocouples. But this is a thermocouple. So this machine actually has 4 probes. There's a primary one, which is in here, called a bean probe. And this is since it's the drum roaster, you can hear it kind of spinning like this at a given RPM. And there's little blades inside of there that like churn. Make the beans tumble. And the bean temperature probe sits inside of the beans as they're rumbling through. Then up here, a little bit higher, is something called an environment temperature probe. And it measures the environmental temperature. It shows you it's the temperature of going into the roaster. The rest of the sort of, we'll call it the anatomy of the machine, this is your hopper. When I open this little chute, the beans will flow from here into the drum. And you'll hear it. It's like a fairly pleasant sound. It sort of actually sounds a little bit like raindrops.
Okay.
They sit in there, and then I start to control the heat and the temperature. And then after about, say, 10 minutes, depending on what my goals are, I will hit this button here called cooling. And this is a really fun machine because There's a sort of an extractor fan over here, and
Okay.
that's the second hose.
Show me a raw bean, show me a cooked bean,
Yeah.
and we're not going to go through the 10-minute process of cooking them, but
Yeah.
then we'll talk about grinding.
So this is a coffee, a sample of coffee that I got just recently. I've actually not even roasted this yet, but the varietal is called a Pacamara, and these Pacamaras are quite a very big bean, like a very large bean. Let's show that. And what I like to keep my batch size sort of like consistent. So what I usually try to do is keep that at about 400. And these beans are what you call green beans.
All right.
Now these beans are actually a little bit bigger than normal. They have a particularly interesting smell. It's unlike anything. Do you want to, like, I can't, it's
okay. It's very earthy.
very earthy. Yeah, it's a raw, uncooked bean that
Okay.
the only thing that's happened to it is it's been fermented. Effectively on my screen here is a roast profile. So depending on the amount of moisture, depending on the density of the bean, and also the size of the bean, and you can also look at, there's some more, maybe tribal knowledge of, where the bean came from, which farm, how it was processed. Those things also do come into play. But in terms of objective variables, bean size, the density of the bean, and the moisture of the bean are very important variables. I actually have a machine here that measures both the moisture and the density for you.
At what point does the artisan take over?
I think where the artisan comes in is there's no set formula for roasting coffee. When you're roasting coffee, you're thinking about what are your goals? Are you trying to create a coffee that is maybe going to be more used for like a pour over? For me as a roaster, what I've really tried to do is create coffee that I personally like.
It's a good start.
And and I think that's what's really enjoyable for me is doing something that I like and then sharing that with the neighbors of Mueller. And I think different roasters can also do the sort of the inverse of that, where they're saying, actually, I want to go make a really nice, fruity, acidic coffee because that's what my customers like. And I'm sort of the other way around, where I want to make something that I really enjoy and then share that with the neighbors. In roasting, there's roughly 3 phases of roasting coffee. The very first phase is what you're doing is when the bean goes into the roasting drum, you're drying the bean. You're taking off all the sort of moisture on the outer shell. The second phase, once the bean has dried, which is usually when the bean has changed enough color, it'll become a sort of a yellowy color. So this is where I usually like to spend a lot of my time in the roast profile, is trying to elongate, but not too long, the Maillard phase. And then the third phase is called the development phase. And so typically the number one characteristic that people talk about when they're buying coffee is, do I want a light roast or a dark roast? And development is usually that. So when you have finished your Maillard phase, and you finish the Maillard phase when you start to hear the beans pop. So just like popcorn, because the moisture inside of the inner part of the bean has now basically reached a boiling point and it's cracked open the bean. So we actually call it first crack. And that's when you know that you've finished the Maillard phase and you're moving into this, what we call the development phase. And the development phase is you tend to keep the roast time to a minimum there. So maybe it's only, maybe it's a percentage of the total roast, or maybe it's just 1 minute after the Maillard phase. And then you turn off and we call it drop the beans. If you leave it, say, 2 minutes, that's called let's just call it the medium roast. At that 2-minute mark, the beans have become a little bit darker. All the moisture will have been extracted through that first crack, most of the moisture at least. And then if you leave them in a little bit longer, that'll be more of a darker roast, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. Most of the beans that I make are somewhere between sort of a light to a medium. A little bit high, I like a little bit stronger than a typical light roast. I like the darker roast. But I want to make sure that sweetness is really what's coming to life. Right at this moment, I'm capturing this note of, these people think this one tastes a little bit like lime blossom.
Okay.
And so at that moment, you're thinking, I can do that. But if I go a little bit longer, that lime blossom might go away. And so these are all the variables that you get to take. And I think it's a lot like cooking, or I think sourdough is actually a pretty good parallel, is everybody's sourdough is a little bit different. Yeah. Everybody's baking style is a little bit different. And so it attracts a certain person to that style that you have created. And so that's what I've been trying to do. These are a bean out of Bolivia. This is my Bolivian coffee. I have actually loved this coffee so far. I call it this, it's really interesting. I call it the abejita, which is in Spanish, the little bee. And the reason is, and I don't know what it is about this particular coffee, but as it's roasting, there's a little honeybee. And I don't know if it's the same one or just a family or they're all interested in it. This little honeybee comes in, doesn't bother me, just sort of smells around. He's like, what is this? And then he goes away. And so I named it the little abejita. And so, yeah, then this is what shows up in your bag. So I will take a little coffee bag. So this morning, yeah, we had a bit of the coffee there. We ground it.
Well, actually, yeah. Quinten ground it.
Sorry, you're right. Quinten, he
loves, was helping out.
He is a major helper. And so, yeah, that is coffee roasting.
What have you learned about life from roasting coffee?
My genuine answer, and I think it's pervasive in a lot of my sort of life's endeavors, is curiosity. When I first saw that ad to learn how to roast coffee, it piqued curiosity. But what curiosity for me is sort of unearthing something that you're unsure of how it works. And I think learning how stuff works really broadens your world purview. And I think things start to make more sense the more things you understand. And so you can, for example, before I started roasting coffee, I enjoyed specialty fancy coffee for, years, maybe a decade before I knew anything about roasting. And like I said, I claimed I knew everything about, specialty coffee. I knew all the processing and all of that, but I actually had no idea how long it takes to roast coffee. Like, it's such a simple thing, right? And since I got curious and I learned how that works, it has sort of started to create more clarity for me of, like, just how the coffee, the pipeline, I guess I'll call it, like the coffee pipeline works. Whether it's importing the green coffee, which I've done, it's roasting, and then the next thing that I'm really curious about is to start going to origin and going to talk to the farmers who are running these farms and sort of what their challenges are. What are their artistic versus mechanistic viewpoints on actually growing coffee? Sustainability is such an interesting passion for me, but I'm actually moving into more of a glass jar. Right. And because I'm only really selling to neighbors, what's also great is they actually prefer that too. They can return it.
And you can get your glass jar back.
I can get the glass jar back. I can give them a discount. Like, it's a really great system. Okay. And then, yeah, sustainability though on the farm, thinking about like what actually got me into this was the country I was living in ran out of water.
Yeah.
And these are real things that are happening around the world.
I get so much kick out of talking to people like this because you begin to see those connections.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why did you get into coffee? Because the country ran out of water. What was that? Yeah.
Right.
What was that?
Yeah.
Now let's talk about a little bit about Miller. 2 questions. What one thing you really love about Miller? And then the other one is, if you could change anything, what would it be?
I was saying earlier in the interview how we moved from Cherrywood to Mueller. In spite of being so close, I was always so worried. Maybe it was not the place that we wanted to be. But literally, like, those moments you have in life where you immediately know this is the right place. I had that with Mueller.
Okay.
Like, that night we moved in and, half of our stuff wasn't even, I was like, this is exactly it. Like, it was immediate friendship, immediate connections. Quinten, he had immediate friends. He can go down the street, it's safe. It's just incredibly diverse, like, groups of people that we meet. And that, for me, is, like, the most exciting thing. Just the different types of people you're able to meet. In fact, I think the reason you and I had met was Kaz. When I first got this this roaster, I had just come out of a back injury, and my wife actually put a message out on the WhatsApp group saying, "Hey, can anybody help me move it in?" Kaz came over. No question. I don't even know I had met him at the time, and then a few days later, he's like, "Hey, John, just so you know, like, I run the M&A. Would you like to donate your beans?" And I was like, this is fantastic, because now I get to learn as I'm roasting coffee and share with neighbors. And that was my first injection point into, like, okay, let's go connect with neighbors. And what's been so nice is, 99% of my sales is just local neighbors. And for the most part, my whole pitch was that me and Quinten, we would like deliver the coffee on our bikes, and we still do that for a lot of people. It was a few days into the business that somebody had mentioned, hey, like you should do a pickup option because people enjoy coming to look at your roaster. And so many people show up and they're like, hey, nice to meet you. I've never met you. I live so and so over here, over there. Can I see your roaster? And I was like, absolutely. And as you can tell, I enjoy talking about it. So I come and I show them. And for them, I hope it's, again, sort of satiating their curiosity about something that is otherwise maybe a little bit opaque or foreign. And so getting to know different neighbors like that. And then we've also started doing quite a lot of like really creative like pop-ups. So there's a group that does a pop-up in Taniguchi Park. I'm able to give them some coffee beans for their thing. Another one of our neighbors, he has like a little Japanese truck that I'm offering or giving him some beans for. I think this weekend there's a new. I don't know if they just moved here or what their deal is exactly, but they're selling or they bake Japanese style bread. So we're gonna do like a little collab where I'm gonna provide the coffee and they're gonna provide the bread.
Let me know.
Yeah, well, definitely. And so all these little fun connections that are just so unique.
Yep.
So the thing I would change, I think it's the name, though. I really want to be the person who calls it Miller. I just can't. I can't call it Miller. And I don't know why.
Question. I want to buy a bottle of coffee. I love it. And I can specify the roast and the bean and all of that.
That's one of my favorite things about this is that because I literally make individual batches. So this is, like I said earlier, like this is my 400 gram batch. When you sign up on the website, if you say I want light roast or dark roast, I can literally keep that in just a little bit longer for you. And it's no different to me. And so I can make them hyper personalized. Or you can just buy them as you want on the website. Like, just give me what you think is the very best.
So this is the Tower Coffee Hour. It'll be interesting to see what we get up when we get all this put together. John, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate your time, and it was so much fun getting to meet Quinten.
That was fun, and the coffee John served was delicious. Quinten supplied the coffee mugs and was helpful in setting up the audio and video equipment, so it went better than expected. John is a supplier of coffee to the Miller Neighborhood Association for our monthly meetings and donates part of his proceeds from one of his store brands to the Miller swim team, the Manatees. If you like good coffee and enjoy a special taste, you need to visit John's website, gradientcoffeeroastery.com, and check out your options. Until the next time we find an interesting neighbor to interview, this is Preston or Tyree signing off and wishing you all the best.